All right, thank you very much, Joseph Hussain, for that background. We have with us in the studios three guests, and of course, we'll begin by welcoming a regular on Good Morning Nigeria, Ambassador Usman Sarki. Ambassador Usman Sarki is Nigeria's former Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations, and most recently, he was a directing staff at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Coup, near Jos in Plateau State. Ambassador Sarki, we're glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, and good morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also here with us in the studios is Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa. He's ECOWAS Commissioner in charge of Political Affairs, Peace and Security. And of course, we had him join us when we had this conversation last week. He was in the UK. So we're glad to have you with us here at the studios, Ambassador Musa.
Thank you.
And once again, you know, we commiserate with you on the passing of your son.
Thank you very much, Kisley.
Okay. Here with us at the studios also is Dr. Umar Ado. Dr. Umar Ado is a historian, and he lectured for about a decade at the Defense Academy in Kaduna. First, he was special assistant of the Vice President, later became special advisor under President Obasanjo with focus on research and strategy. Published author and public affairs analyst. Dr. Ado, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's begin this conversation with the ECOWAS Commissioner, who is in charge of political affairs, peace, and security. The deadline that the authority of ECOWAS, heads of state and government, gave to the military personnel that seized power in Niamey, the deadline expired yesterday, being Sunday. And I'm sure on many lips and of course in the hearts of many, the impression would be by now you'll be seeing missiles flying all around, as we saw Gulf 1, Gulf 2 against Iraq, and of course the Saddam administration in Baghdad. But here we are, almost 24 hours, let's say about 12 hours, crawling to 12 hours since the expiration of that deadline. What is happening?
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, the deadline expired, but I don't think the beating of war drums, have a place now. In military terms, we call something strategic ambiguity. Okay, that is keep people guessing when and where you are going to strike. That is one of the laws of war, right? So the fact that the deadline has expired does not mean that ECOWAS is inactive. Just last week, we had the meeting, a planning meeting of the chiefs of defense staff, who are put together, the whole concept, planning, costing, and everything, and then pledges by member states of ECOWAS for this operation. And let me also remind the audience that people are emphasizing the military intervention aspect, forgetting that ECOWAS said we are going to exhaust all diplomatic channels before war. And I don't think that have been exhausted yet. And there are non-kinetic measures that are in place which are already working, including the sanctions against Niger, today. So ECOWAS has an array of tools. And on Thursday, there's going to be another emergency summit of ECOWAS, the heads of state, who would give further directives as to what will be the next move for the region. Like I said, Kingsley, everything is on the table. All the options are there. But we are still pursuing the diplomatic path, to resolve, this issue. But let nobody be in doubt about the resolve of the member states of ECOWAS that if all diplomatic channels are exhausted and constitutional order is not restored in the country, or very clear signs of restoration of constitutional order, we are not going to eliminate the military intervention option.
Okay, since the coup, there's been a lot of tensions in Africa and across the world, and we've always known that ECOWAS has always been firm in its opposition to any unconstitutional change of government. Now, going by the coup in Mali, Burkina Faso, and the other countries, people have been saying ECOWAS has been backing for too long. Is it ready to bite?
Yeah. Yeah, I always, tell people that the fact that ECOWAS did not act in the past does not mean ECOWAS must not act now, right? There were, probably some mistakes that ECOWAS had made in the past, but that does not, mean, that when a situation like what happened in Mali or Burkina Faso occurs again, we are going to be silent. And like I said also on another program, ECOWAS is under new leadership, under the chairmanship of, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. There is a new administration at the ECOWAS Commission. There is a new dynamic that is happening, and there is a resolve to make sure that ECOWAS protocols are obeyed by all member states. They've all signed up to them. And I think if we continue, which will be the next domino, to fall, we are, having, like we just heard in the report, 7 military coups in the last, 3 years or so. So if we allow, this tendency to continue, then the whole West Africa very soon will be under the rule of military boots, in it. And we need to stop it at some point. You see, so this is what is happening. And let me say it once more, that there is a very steely determination, to make sure that the coup in Niger is reversed and constitutional order is restored. That resolve is there. And if the heads of state are meeting within, roughly a week, twice, on the Niger issue, it tells you about the seriousness with which the heads of state view this matter. So the military chiefs are there. The member states have pledged, already troops and equipment, for this force. And they are coming to this summit to concretize those pledges. So we just want the junta, in Niger, know that, look, that military option is never off the table. But we are going to exhaust all diplomatic means, first and foremost, before, we move on. And I want to correct one error, because I've been, sort of reviewing a lot of the media interventions in Nigeria. And if you are, in Nigeria here, or even outside, you have the impression that this is going to be a war between Nigeria and Niger. It's not. If it comes to that, it is going to be ECOWAS and Niger. It just happens that Nigeria is the current chair of ECOWAS. If it had been any other member state, I don't think that, that kind of
media
attention, media attention would have been there. So I just want to correct that impression. I know why the issue is so sensitive in Nigeria. Nigeria borders Niger. So the proximity, of Niger to Nigeria adds impetus to this debate that is ongoing. But I just want to assure our fellow Nigerian citizens that this is an enterprise by ECOWAS.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Musa. We'll come to you presently in the conversation. Ambassador Usman Sarki, some would say that pretty challenging diplomatic engagements at this time. In your opinion, how challenging is this?
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be on your program this morning. And Jumai, good morning, my sister. Yes, it is a challenging prospect facing our president, facing our government, facing our country and our region. Because of that, we have to tread very, very carefully, take all issues into consideration. But mainly, we should be guided by the facts, not by sentiments or other considerations that are not germane to the situation. The fact of the matter is that a coup had taken place in an independent country, a member of ECOWAS, and that coup contravened the constitution of Niger, the 2010 constitution amended in 2017, provisions, the preamble, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and article 45 and so forth of the Niger constitution absolutely prohibited forceful takeover of government, undemocratic change of government. And also that coup contravened the provision of the ECOWAS protocol on governance and democracy. And also it contravened the provisions of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, particularly the provisions on good governance, on democracy, on the protection of civil society, and so forth. It also contravened the provisions of the African peer review mechanism. And globally, it contravened the sentiments of the world against forceful unconstitutional change of government. Now the problem here is that a lot of factors have infused themselves into the issue, such as the consideration of the relationship between Nigeria and Niger. And those sentiments and concerns are legitimate to be expressed by people, by communities, by civil society, by organizations, by religious leaders, because that forms the galvanization of public opinion in the making of foreign policy. But they do not detract from the fact that something had taken place in Niger that triggered the action and reaction of ECOWAS and Nigeria. So I think I will advise that we should look at the facts. And I did a memorandum for the government, which I submitted to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in my own personal capacity. I pointed out 12 facts that are immutable, that could not be contested around the issue of takeover of the government of Niger by the military. And those facts should guide policy and the way we structure our responses and calibrate the actions to be taken by ECOWAS. So what I will say in answer to what you have, the question you raised, is that it is a challenging issue, but we must look at it holistically within the context of the law, within the context of the facts facing us, and then we should also, if I were to advise our president, that to listen to the larger voice of the civil society out there, all across the country, that seems emphatically to ask and demand for peaceful resolution of the situation and not to resort to military action. But military action, like Ambassador Musa said, is an option reserved by ECOWAS as a last resort in order to rectify an illegal action that had taken place, perpetrated by a section of the military of Niger. So we should not, ab initio, place impediments in the path of our government and the governments of ECOWAS and the ECOWAS Commission in its undertaking and deliberation to correct a situation that had taken place in Niger against the will of the people of that country and against the constitution of the country and against regional ordinances and continental constitutive act. So we have to look at this broadly, dispassionately, without sentiments. Now, a lot of people are saying about the commonality between us. If you attack Niger, you are attacking northern Nigeria, or if you go into Niger militarily, you are irrevocably damaging our relationship and things like that. One can understand that sentiment because Nigeria and Niger are virtually the one country. Historically, we were the same, under two principalities, under two administrations. In the eastern part, Niger and Nigeria under the Borno Empire. So the entire range of the eastern area of Niger, from Difa up to Bilma and Jabo on the border of Libya, they were under Borno control. So predominantly the Kanambu, Manga, Kanuri, Shua Arab, Tubo, these are the populations with some Tuareg and others. In the western part, that region fell under the Sokoto Caliphate. But these regions were excised by the British and the French when they came into the Anglo-French agreement, first of 1898, where the delimitation of borders took place right from the Senegambia up to Lake Chad. And the British and the French conceded territories. They exchanged them. So in our own case, most of our territories under Sokoto and Borno was ceded to the French in order to settle differences between England and France in other parts of the world, like in Egypt and so forth. The second treaty was the 1904 Convention, Anglo-French Convention, or the Convention of Fisheries in Newfoundland. And that was popularly in history today, it became known as the Entente Cordiale. In 1904, England and France signed the agreement whereby Nigerian territories were ceded to France in order to satisfy a situation, to solve a situation in Canada, in Newfoundland in Canada, so that French demands on access to fisheries in Newfoundland will not be asserted, so that Britain will have full control of Newfoundland. So they gave our territories to the French. So these are things that Nigerians should know, that we here, Nigeria, and over there, Niger, were actually one entity, the same people, the same history, culture, religion, traditions, languages, and everything. So complications, when they arise, should be settled amicably within the ambit of peaceful coexistence, good neighborliness, non-interference in the internal affairs, subject to the understanding that the internal affairs do not subvert the order of the day or the sensitivities of the people that are bordering that community. And those principles were enunciated first by our late Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, in New York on December 7. So this, October 7, 1960. So these are issues that we can discuss along the line, which we have to be really very aware of. So Nigeria and Niger are one, really, but we are divided by colonial history.
Yes.
So any action by West Africa should take into consideration this unison between us, which should not lead to further distancing of our relationship.
Yes, indeed. You've brought, to fore so many issues that most Nigerians don't know, and Nigeria and Niger is one. Now let's bring in Dr. Umar Addo, to the conversation. There's a new sheriff in town, and that is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Both guests in the studio, Ambassador Aliyu has said that we should consult and listen to the larger population of Nigerians. Now, I want to ask you this question. The meeting that took place yesterday with the northern governors, with President Ahmed Tinubu, what do you think should be discussed were discussed on the table. You know, an instance where if at the end of the day all dialogue fails and military action takes place, do you think they were talking about resolutions on how to evade?
Okay, thank you very much. The central reason why Nigeria and ECOWAS are trying to invade, so to speak, as the last resort to rectify the problem in Niger is because it is seen that the Nigerian military had breached the provision of its constitution. Now, Ambassador has spoken a whole lot. The United Nations Charter is very clear. Non-aggression from member states. I think Article 3 of the United Nations is also very clear that there should be no interference in the internal affairs of another country. The Article 2.3, I think, of the African Union is also very clear that non-interference of the basic principle is non-interference in the affairs of internal affairs of another country. Now, this is basic in international relations. It is the foundation for peace. And it emphasizes one thing, that might is not right. And it also emphasizes equality of states. If, for example, a coup takes place, in Nigeria, just for example, hypothetically, it is highly unlikely for ECOWAS states to come together and say they will organize, as a last resort to invade Nigeria. Why? Because Nigeria is a mighty country. So it is therefore assumed that what is happening in Niger is because comparatively the Nigerian military, 13,000, against Nigerian military of 200 and something thousand, then the armaments and so on. So it's because Niger is small, Niger is weak, it's a poor country, therefore there can be a threat and in fact actual, carrying out of this threat of military intervention. Now, the moment we trample upon this basic principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of another country, which is central in maintaining international law and order and peace, then we will go into problems. We have seen that in Iraq. The United States organized its own, what they call coalition of the willing, and then invaded Iraq in order to remove a dictator and then put in democracy. There's democracy in Iraq today, then in Syria, then in Afghanistan, then Guatemala, and so many countries in this world. So might cannot be right. You cannot use an unconstitutional means in order to rectify an unconstitutional act. So, and in the country today, Ambassador has said it, your Ambassador has said it, the sentiment is against military intervention, whatever it is. So, and the envoy of the president, that is the General Abdul Salam team that went there, I think they came back with something very concrete. When the coup took place, from what I got, when they went to meet with they met with the third military leader there. They did not meet with the president, the head of state now. They did not meet with the second person in power, but they met with the third person in power. And what the man and their group said is that, yes, a coup took place. They were not called upon by ECOWAS to say us what happened. They were not consulted in any way. And then they passed a resolution. They only saw this resolution on the news. So now the Abdul Salam team gave them the resolution. So, and in their wisdom, they said, look at the resolution, we are messengers. So they said, okay, give us time. Let us look at this resolution, then give our response to the resolution, and then you can come back maybe after 7 days to come and collect back our response, take it to the chairman of ECOWAS, and then on the basis of our response, he now calls for a meeting of ECOWAS heads of state and then discuss this resolution. Then an ultimatum was also given at the same time when in that resolution. But during that period, they also cut off, the lives of Niger, which is, an agreement between Nigeria and Niger for the purpose of maintaining the free flow of the Niger River. Then, two, they have put an economic sanction. They have closed borders. They have put a non-fly zone. So what is left? The ultimatum, the only thing left in that ultimatum is war. And the sentiment is against war. And Ambassador has outlined the relationship between Nigeria and Niger. You cannot just change that relationship, even though the Europeans have dissected us and separated us. But that we have not left the relationship. I come from Adamawa State. They have dissected Adamawa between Nigeria and Germany. Most of our people live in Cameroon today, and I have relations in Cameroon. I have my brothers and sisters married from Cameroon and so on. So we cannot just throw away on the platter just because the Europeans have divided us. We cannot just throw away this relationship. So I would suggest very strongly to the president and also to all members of ECOWAS that military options should be off the table, completely off the table. And what do you need? You block them. If you want to support them, go there, support a group, and that group should now change their own system by itself. But for us to mobilize our military and then invade a sovereign nation, we have transgressed the Charter of the United Nations, we have transgressed the Charter of the African Union, and don't think there is any within the ECOWAS protocol that sanction, interference in internal affairs of another member state. I don't think so. So we should not use an unlawful means, to rectify an unlawful act. Besides, I have opposed the military regime, in all its entirety. But that military regime came without a shed of blood. If we go on military intervention, there's going to be blood. So why should we shed blood to rectify a bloodless, system? I think we should take a position that will be effective, that will enhance our sovereignty and the sovereignty of every nation, and it will not cause aggression. Already, we have seen some ECOWAS countries have pledged to support Niger. We have seen it in Mali, we have seen Guinea, Burkina Faso, also Algeria, and yesterday I saw even Egypt. So Niger and Nigeria are both members of ECOWAS. We are both members of United Nations Organization, members of African Union, and members of Organization of Islamic States. So why a Muslim-Muslim ticket in Nigeria will not solve a Muslim-Muslim problem between two Muslim countries? I think we should do that. That's my position.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Umar Ado, for your position. I'm sure that the other guests may respond to the aspects relating to the principle of non-interference in international law and how that principle has been diminished in recent decades on account also of the willing surrender of part of the powers of each of the states in the Committee of Nations. But I want to come back to Ambassador Musa, and I'm sure that Ambassador Sarki may also respond to this. I'm asking this question with the utmost respect to their excellencies, members of the authority of the ECOWAS heads of state and government. Was there, as it were, earlier you talked about some errors. Was there a drafting problem with the communique? Because I asked this question again with the tremendous respect to their excellencies. Was it a search for quick fix to have inserted the last clause of the threat of use of force? If diplomacy was going to be the first move, accompanied by sanctions and ultimately the threat of use of force. I'm asking this because virtually every other conversation now centers on that clause. Mali responding, Guinea responding, Burkina Faso responding, and even the members of the junta themselves in Niamey also responding to that last threat to say we will use that. So why did that appear to have entered the drafting of the communique ab initio? I mean, you were just meeting and yes.
You're absolutely right in terms of the sequencing, of action following, the coup d'etat. And there is a background to that, because there was a contagion in the region for the past 3 years, right? And it goes against all the tenets of ECOWAS protocols and African Union protocols. And I would want to correct one thing. I know there are a lot of sentiments here. If you take any two countries in Africa, the ethnic and religious relations are very clear. Any two countries or three countries neighboring each other, because our borders are arbitrary, and others. So it is not only Nigeria and Niger. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire share a very large ethnic community together. Ghana and Togo, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Liberia and Cote d'Ivoire. Just mention any country. And then the whole ethnic dimensions in Niger, whether the Tuareg, would the Tuaregs, straddle all the countries in Central Sahel, for example. So, so that is one reality of Africa. Number two, I don't think the UN Charter and the African Union Constitutive Act and ECOWAS protocols should just be interpreted mechanically. In fact, the Constitutive Act indicates that non-interference does not mean non-indifference. Okay, so that is what the Constitutive Act is saying. And ECOWAS protocols also, in particularly the mechanism on conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security, says that any threat in any country, any developments in a country that threatens the security of the region has the responsibility to act. All the countries of ECOWAS have signed up to the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance, which declares zero tolerance for power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. So to every issue of non-interference, there are counter-arguments. And once you sign up to regional protocols, statutes, you cede part of your sovereignty. That is what it means in international law, particularly in peace and security terms. So this is where Niger finds itself today with respect to what ECOWAS and its protocols. Probably from hindsight, right, we would have given all, peaceful means the opportunity to function before, like you said, Kingsley, before going to the military action. But ECOWAS will never remove the military option. In fact, if ECOWAS, led by Nigeria in the first place, had not intervened in the 1990s in Liberia and Sierra Leone, the whole of West Africa would have been engulfed in war. That is a reality. In 2016, there was an attempted, maintenance of power by President Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia. We deployed a preventive force in that country, and they were ready to use force, in that country. I agree, with the fact that, of course, you are not going to, even if the UN does something wrong, you are not going to just attack the United States because of its might and then all that. But in this case, we are talking about principles, right? would have maybe sequentially gone from the lowest denominator to the highest. Yeah, but we have put everything on the table. Nobody is saying that now that the ultimatum has expired, we are going to intervene tomorrow. Okay? But we are not removing that option from the table. And that if you remove it, then what is it? If the negotiations are not going to take place, when the authority affairs of, say, President Tinubu, despite the delegation led by former head of state, General Abdul Salami, and then the Sultan of Sokoto and others to that place, the Chiani himself, General, the leader, was not even in the, did not even meet them. In fact, they were at the airport. They didn't even go into Niamey town, proper. So if you are meeting such defiance, okay, from a country that has broken rules that they have all signed up to, and in the first place, the Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance came into force under the chairmanship of the former president of Niger, President Tanja, when he was president. So once you have signed up to them, and then you say that ECOWAS has no right, to intervene, when you breach those rules, I think it is fundamentally wrong. And if we do that, then where do we end? You see, so this is the issue. If we talk about the countries that have, said any attack on Niger is an attack on them, it is among the ECOWAS member states, it is the coalition of the countries that have breached ECOWAS protocols. You are talking about Guinea, you are talking about Burkina Faso, you are talking about Mali. These are the only three countries that have said from ECOWAS, region that they are, because all of them are in the same basket. And we are demanding that all of them restore constitutional order by 2024, before the end of 2024. So of course they see Niger as an example. If we are not able to enforce the will of the region on Niger, then it means they have got also green light to continue with military rule. And I don't think citizens of Nigeria, just like citizens of Ghana, where I come from, should take military rule lightly. Everybody knows the antecedents of military rule in the in the region, and it is not an alternative to democracy, and we have to do everything to strengthen our democratic principles in the region. This is where ECOWAS is coming from. So we have not exhausted the diplomatic means. We continue with them, and already sanctions are biting. In the country, it is very obvious from our own monitoring, that there is a lot of pressure on the authorities there. We hope that this situation will be resolved, and there will be an agreement to restore constitutional order without the use of force in the country. This is what we are saying. So so the array of tools that we have put on the table, we are still following them sequentially, because we said the use of force is the very last resort, and we stick to that. But the heads of state are determined, like
Or do we still need to look inwards?
no, I think look, ECOMOG existing, this situation could still have happened. This, this is what I would tell you, because, the fact that you have a force against, all these unconstitutional changes or government or, in fact, instability, does not mean that there will not be instability. And, and today, if you take our region, it is really very interesting. I just want to give you, an example just to contextualize what we are discussing, right? Take Burkina Faso as a country. Before President Kabore was removed from office, right? About 30 to 35% of the territory was outside state control under the jihadists. The number of internally displaced was about 700,000. And Kabore was removed. And the excuse by the military was that they were not handling the security situation. And that is why they removed the civilian government. And since then, we've had 2 military regimes in Burkina Faso. What's the situation today? 70% of Burkina Faso is outside state control. The number of IDPs, internally displaced in Burkina Faso, is 2 million from 700,000. So what justification can the military give for taking over power? When in the first place, the first responsibility of the military is to fight the jihadists, to fight terrorists. So is there a reason why the military would take power, accusing the civilians that they are allowing insecurity to cascade in the region, and you come and insecurity becomes even worse? And then we sit down, we are watching. Today, from Burkina Faso, Benin is being targeted. Togo is being targeted. Cote d'Ivoire is being targeted by jihadists. And the source is where? Burkina Faso. So the region should just sit down and fold its arms while jihadists take over a whole country. For example. I mean, that is it. And it is the same, issue with the Mali, in terms of insecurity and the coup. And today in Niger, they are still talking about the same. And Niger was actually about the best among the Central Sahelian countries, alongside Chad, which were able to contain the jihadist onslaught. And then you remove the government and you want the region to sit down and watch you and say that we should not interfere in the internal affairs. That's a regional issue.
Ambassador Musa, thank you very much. I hope I remember to pop a question to you on jihadists and the response of the domestic military authority, to those threats. Ambassador Usman Sarki, still the same question. Earlier on, you responded to how challenging the situation is on the diplomatic front, and now, so that again, I say this with tremendous respect to the authority of heads of state and government, so that there are no further missteps. That drafting issue I talked about, because that seems to have grabbed the headlines, and that's what everyone is talking about. I mean, if we were to decompose or aggregate our responses to the questions we have asked, you find that everything is almost dovetailing into that threat to use force. So how do we avoid this kind of drafting problems and advise their excellencies on the Musa said?
Thank you very much. I think the way forward is for governments to trust their ministries of foreign affairs, to trust their diplomats, to trust the foreign policy and security establishments of their countries. Now, when our president, His Excellency Ahmed Bola Tinubu, went to Guinea-Bissau, he made this declaration in his speech on non-tolerance or zero tolerance to military coups and unconstitutional takeover of government. If he had on his team some experienced diplomats, they would have advised him that that statement should actually emanate from the ECOWAS side, to be endorsed by the heads of state in response to the tabling of that proposition. In that way, it becomes a collective affair adopted by everybody. Now everybody is hinging the argument on that statement made by our president. Very forceful, straightforward, unambiguous statement about intolerance towards military intervention. That is the problem. And I think he repeated it in Nairobi when he went. That is not bad. It is a position as a democrat that he would like to convey to the world, and particularly to the region, that it cannot be business as usual. Impunity should not be condoned. Transgression against the constitution of your country should not be approved, should not be applauded, should not be rewarded. That said, what we will do is for our governments, not only Nigeria, but ECOWAS governments, to always resort to international law experts, diplomats, military and security experts, to advise them on the appropriate wordings of resolutions. It is very important that processes and normative contexts are clearly understood, especially in terms of the end result and ramifications. So the August 4 resolution of ECOWAS is not bad in itself, but the perception that has been created around it by civil society, by academics, activists, and people of general concern is that it triggers automatically military intervention in Niger. That may not be the case. In international law, there are processes that you need to follow to activate military intervention in another country. Like Dr. rightly pointed out, Article 2 of the United Nations, particularly Section 4 of that article, demanded member states of the United Nations to refrain from interference in the affairs of other countries, particularly through the use of force. Now, international law under use cautions, that is, the peremptory norms of international law from which there can be no derogation, established in the Corfu Channels case in 1949, that is between Albania and the United Kingdom, on access to the channel of Corfu and so forth, that the use of force is not something to be condoned under international law in the relations between countries. The other case was the Nicaragua case between Nicaragua and United Nations in 1986. Also, the International Court of Justice ruled that it is illegal to use military force to settle affairs between two countries. However, Chapter 7 of the UN Charter has given allowance to the Security Council of the United Nations to take appropriate measures, including military intervention, to reverse a situation that poses a threat to international peace and security. And under Chapter 8, supported by the provisions of Article 53 of the United Nations Charter, regional arrangements can be triggered to lead to intervention in the affairs of another country if egregious violation of law, order, human rights, and so forth is perceived to be taking place. Now, there is another provision under international law or process. There is the International Commission on Intervention and State Sovereignty that led to the adoption of the principle of responsibility to protect. That also provided the normative context, the principles and philosophical context in which intervention could take place on humanitarian grounds, where war crimes serious violation of human rights, genocide, and things like that are to take place. So it's a very complex issue that cannot be dissected or understood within a program like this one. But the bottom line is that there should not be precipitation towards military action in this specific case of Niger and ECOWAS. However, the credibility of the regional grouping, the integrity of ECOWAS, and moreover, the decision of the heads of state and government of ECOWAS must be respected and should not be treated with disdain or condescension, dismissal by anybody, let alone by the illegal regime that has taken government forcefully in Niger. This is a matter of law, a matter of principle, a matter of convention. We have to be very clear. We should separate the facts based on the law, on principles and conventions from the sentiments of the people.
Ambassador Sarki, thank you very much. Dr. Ado, we're going to get the last comment from you, but very briefly, because we have a second topic. Ambassador Musa referenced a number of comments, and then he has sought to also correct them. It cannot be said and shouldn't be said that the authority of ECOWAS, heads of state and government, that the authority is now seeking to save its face. It's already expressed its displeasure at what happened in Niger. And the whole idea, as Ambassador Musa has also indicated, and I'm sure other analysts will agree, is not to decimate Niger and its people, but to say, fulfill your own international obligations. But now that everyone, almost everyone, is hanging on to the coattails of, say, war, 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 what advice would you give to the authority of ECOWAS heads of state to back off, as it were, without eliminating that particular option, to say that, look, as I said, not a matter of face saving, but that our intendment wasn't to go and destroy Niger?
In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds? Okay. Well, okay. Let them use diplomatic and economic and political means of getting this issue resolved. My fear is this: if you use military, it is going to escalate the problem seriously. Already, we've seen report, I don't know how authentic it is, that the junta in Niger had already signed an agreement with an international mercenary, the Wagner Group. Now, this is going to throw the West African sub-region into a theater of international and global crisis. And we do not know where it will end. And right now, where the tension is in the international community between the West and the East, for the purpose of international supremacy, global supremacy, this is a very dangerous thing to do. So we should not allow the West or the East to come and use us to play a proxy war in our territory.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Umar Addo, a PhD degree in history, lecturer at the NDA Kaduna for 10 years, was special assistant to the Vice President and special advisor to President Obasanjo on research and strategy. He's an author and a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Ambassador Usman Sarki, former Nigerian Deputy Permanent Representative to United Nations. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ambassador Abdul Fattah Musa, ECOWAS Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security. It's good to have you in the studio this time around.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we'll take a break now. When we return, our second conversation will begin. Don't go away.
Our commitment is to promote the greatest good for the greatest number of our people. On principle, we shall never falter. We will get out of this turbulence. And due to the measures we have taken, Nigeria will be better equipped and able to take advantage of the future that awaits her.
Hey, Welcome to the Star Times 35th anniversary celebration. To say thank you to every Star Times family for being an integral part of our journey. Star Times has decided to give you a price slash on decoders. Yes, we are slashing the price of our antenna decoder from 8,900 naira to 7,500 naira and the dish decoder from 13,300 naira to 9,900 naira. But that's not all. Existing subscribers can recharge for 2 months on their current bouquet and get upgraded to the next higher bouquet. And if you recharge on the classic or super bouquet, you'll receive a fantastic reward of extra 15 days of free viewing. You can enjoy our top local and international content. So, what are you waiting for? Quickly, visit any Star Times outlet around you to recharge or buy your decoder between June 12th to August 31st to enjoy this fabulous offer. Wow! Yay! Let the celebration begin! Star Times, entertain your family.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
We must all join hands to work hard so that we build a country for our grandchildren.
My hope is that we develop as a nation where every citizen is given his due right. There is transparency, honesty, and integrity.
Put the interests of this country first and foremost. Interest of Nigeria is being one nation, one people.
The need, if I mean, to put things right, things that have gone wrong before, to try and put right, for this, for the love of country.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now we have our guests here with us in the studios for the second topic, and they are from the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, which of course has responsibility for regulating the education, training, and practice of engineering in all ramifications. Let's welcome three guests. First, Professor Sadiq Abubakar. Sadiq Zubair Abubakar, he's president of COREN and chairman of council. We're glad to have you in the studios this morning.
Good morning, viewers.
Okay. Also here with us is Professor Adisa Ademola Bello, is the registrar of COREN. Professor Adisa, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. And Engineer Olaolu Ogunduile, vice president of COREN and chairman of the organizing committee of the 31st COREN Engineering Assembly. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
And they are all, I should also add, fellows of the Nigerian Society of Engineers.
Yes, all of them.
Do you mind?
Yes. So, gentlemen, let me begin with Professor Sadiq Zubair Abubakar. What brings COREN to our studio this morning?
Thank you very much. We are here to formally usher in our annual events, the Engineering Assembly, as it has been said. We are commencing the 31st Engineering Assembly today, which is a 3-day event whereby engineers, technicians, technologists, craftsmen that are practicing in Nigeria and even in diaspora usually comes together and review our activities for 1 year and identify gaps and formulate interventions that will improve our practices so as to be able to serve more diligently in our profession for our country and even beyond. So usually this is something that we call assembly that comprises of basically 3 key events. a general assembly that we hold tomorrow, whereby we have dignitaries that will come and we speak to an important issue. In this year, we are looking at our code of conduct of practice. How do we strengthen that and entrench more deeply how our registered practitioners across the country perform their practices of engineering? And the second major activity is what you call the Engineering Family Forum, whereby the four categories that we have. You know, COREN is an umbrella of 4 different professionals: the engineers, the technologists, the technicians, and the craftsmen. Each of these professionals have what you call associations. Like we have the NSE for the engineers, we have NATE for the technologies, we have NICED for the technicians, and we have NAEC for the craftsmen, and we have what you call AKEN, you know, the Association for the Consulting Engineers. Now, usually these 4 or 5, COREN usually, you know, invite them with other key stakeholders like MAN, like ITF, like, you know, SON. We sit down and we look into 1 or 2 issues that we believe is creating some hindrances for our professionals to practice. This year we also have created what we call a blended kind of practice, where our colleagues in diaspora, because we have registered professional engineers, technologists that are practicing in other climes all over the world, and they have requested that they want to partake and participate in such annual events. So this year we are also having a virtual perspective of that. Those that are not available physically in Nigeria can join and participate. And so at the end of the day, we usually pull out what we call resolutions that will talk to some key issues that will be able to improve the standard and quality of our services, looking at the upstream right from education, like Kingsley said, the educational aspect where you train, at the university level, at the polytechnic level, at the non-technic level, and even at technical colleges level, down to the trainings and then the practicing. So basically, this is what we are going to have this week.
All right. Thank you very much, President of COREN. Let's bring in the registrar now, Professor Adisa Ademola Bello. The President has already ticked off some of the key highlights of the conference, but tell our viewers some more. Where is the conference taking place, and what is the duration of the conference, and who are the expected participants?
Thank you very much. The conference is taking place at the International Conference Center here in Abuja. Today, Monday, from 8 o'clock right to 6 o'clock p.m., participants will be registering. We have online registration. Those who have already registered by now, their materials are ready. So what they do today is to pick them up. Tomorrow we'll have the opening ceremony. The opening ceremony is also going to be in the International Conference Center. We are expecting the President of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Tinubu, to be the special guest at the event. We are hoping also that the Vice President will also be at that event. The chairman of that event is the MD of Wema Bank, Mr. Maruf Oseni, and we expect that all MDAs that are involved in engineering practices will be present. Chiefly, we expect that our host, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Works and Housing, will be the host of the meeting, and the Permanent Secretary of the Federal Capital Territory will also be a co-host of that meeting. We also expect that the board chairman of engineering institution in Ghana will be our lead speaker. So we're looking at an international perspective to what we'll be discussing. We hope that at the family forum, we'll rub minds a little bit different from what we are used to. In the past, we normally bring the practitioners to tell us what they have done. We discuss our issues, challenges, and profile ways forward. But this time, we're looking a little bit different because there are some new things that have come up. Chiefly, the fact that Korean will no longer be sponsored by will not be part of budget of the Federal Republic. So we're asking our practitioners to come sit with us. Let's chart a new way. What are the things that we need to do to be able to be sustainable in Nigeria? We'll be doing that also at the International Conference Center. We're rounding up, God willing, on that Wednesday, the 9th of August, with a dinner where all the practitioners will unwind from what we have done, hopefully between today, Monday, right through to that Wednesday.
Indeed, you will need definitely to unwind. Every conference has a theme. What is your theme for this year, and why did you choose the theme?
Yeah, we are looking at the theme as you have actually mentioned, that entrenching and strengthening engineering practitioners, code of conduct, and the resilience in engineering practice in Nigeria. Because if you look at it, every nation, every clime has code of conduct. If we are entrenching engineering practice, we need to know, we need to have a standard. We need to look at what are the codes. If you want to supervise, you must look at the areas and codes of what you need to practice. For instance, if you are having a site, maybe as a construction site, you need to have the cadres of engineers that will be there. There will be an engineer, there will be a technologist, there will be a technician, there will be a craftsman. So code on that, apart from that, the materials and the strength and all the things that you have to do, we need to look at them so that actually we can now re-energize ourselves to see that things are done properly. And like the registrar said, we need to evaluate matters of mutual interest that will actually help us to enhance the growth of engineering in this country.
Well, that's fine. Code of conduct for engineering practice is a very significant one against the backdrop of some of the challenges we've been having with engineering matters. I know that the usual response is that it is quacks that are involved. Structural collapses, this is the business of quacks. They didn't engage such persons. What will you be looking at in strengthening the regulation of engineering? I'm not an engineer, for instance, so I would need an engineer to supervise my project. So what is it you're seeking to do instead of often running into a corner and say, no, those are quacks. Bridge collapses in Abuja, in Kano, in Port Harcourt, in Onitsha, everywhere, all over. And everybody keeps looking at saying, look, maybe just what are Nigerian engineers doing? President.
Thank you. The essence of usually what we call the code of conduct or practice is in every profession is what we call the documented or prepared developed benchmarks. You must have code and standards. And then from there, you stem out what we call the code of practice. And then you also follow with enforcement of compliance. And if there are breaches, you now apply the sanctions. Now, this is the value chain of every regulatory processes. Now, in our case, we have x-rayed this process and we have identified gaps. For instance, let me take the building industry, which you just said as an example. The nation is yet to have what we call the National Building Code. It was initiated, but it was not concluded. So when you want to talk about collapse of building, the first thing you must interrogate is, where are the code and standard in the building industry? When you have that, you may need to disaggregate that. It's a building, residential or industrial or whatever. These are different. This will demand for different building codes and standards. And then therefrom, like the Vice President mentioned, when you go to a building site, for instance, in Abuja here or anywhere, we are developing the procedures of when you are having a new building site, you need to give it a number. this is number so-so, in serial kind of numbering, so that you track how many buildings do you have, for instance, in Abuja. And then we have our protocols. There is what we call ERM. It's a team, engineering regulatory monitoring. In each state or in each place like Abuja, we have the ERM team. We want to review the procedure. How do they do the siting? How do they monitor the sites? Like you said, when you go to the site, there is what we call the checklist on personnel. Do we have the right personnel? Are they registered? Are they having the competencies? For instance, if you have a civil engineer, taking the responsibility of a structural engineer, to us, that is in what we call in-house quackery. If you have an electrical engineer that taking the responsibility of a mechanical engineer on a building site, it's in-house quackery. And there is the outright quackery whereby non-professional who is not qualified to be an engineer and who has not even registered as the practice is also carrying out these responsibilities. So there are many levels of quackeries. And so this year's assembly is trying to really look deeper into these our procedures such that we'll be able to now fill the gaps. Okay. In each discipline, in each, for example, this is industry sector. If you look at the oil and gas sector, the telecommunication sector, the mining sector, all those sectors, they are supposed to have similar treatment, code and standards, code of conduct, enforcement and compliance, and then sanction. This is the way.
Juma, I just needed to point this out. We may not have time to get into it. I just checked now. The National Building Code was signed by former President Obasanjo, I understand, in 2006, 2007. So there's a National Building Code, just to correct that. Yes. But very quickly, I don't know, you want to pop a question. Let me throw this in, because you talked about the Engineering Family Forum you're going to have, which will be rounded off with a dinner. Do you intend, for instance, to discuss on the issue that has come up on Good Morning Nigeria, namely, when are we going to have increased Nigerian content, engineering content, in major engineering projects going on in the country, by having consortia? Consortia, instead of only one-man business, come here and be consultant, this one, the other one is on. Where will you have big Nigerian engineering firms to handle major projects, instead of us every time going outside to go and bring foreigners and then get our when you go to the sites, you see them, your construction site, building sites.
The Dangote refinery.
The Dangote refinery.
11,000
11,000 persons hired from India. 11,000, persons hired. Although those are technicians and technologists and so on and so forth.
Yes.
We're told that. So is this an issue you are going to discuss? We had good construction firms in Nigeria in the past. Oni and Sons, it was a good one in the western region. So what happened? That Nigerian engineers would, with the greatest respect, appear to be playing second fiddle.
Thank you very much. These are issues that must be discussed. These are issues on the table that we are going to discuss. I feel very, very sad when I heard what happened at the Dangote refinery. And it shows that we are lacking somewhere. But the truth about it is not that we are actually lacking. We actually have these professionals that are on ground, but to some extent, they have not been identified. If we don't have professionals, I'm sure you must have heard it. Just this June, the International Engineering Alliance gave Nigeria a clean breath to say that what we are teaching, what we are training on engineers in Nigeria is comparable to the elite group of the Washington Accord. And we have been admitted so. The very second in the entire African continent. It's a plus for us. And that shows that we are actually doing it. But how can we identify these people that are actually practicing that don't come to the fore? One of them is the political will. You'll discover that if a project is given and Nigerian companies are actually bidding for those projects, they hardly get it. even with the executive order 5 that the president signed into law, we're still having, a problem of implementation. So I think it is the political will. That is one. And one of the things that we're going to be discussing at this conference is to ensure that those gaps that we have identified, how do we fill them up? Because we're really concerned. And I can assure you it will be part of what we're going to be discussing at the Family Forum come Wednesday this week.
Exactly.
Before the dinner.
Before the dinner. Of course, there's a lot of concerns. And he raised some issues, a mechanical engineer going in to work for an electrical engineer. And we've had issues of building collapse. A lot of people have died from these issues. What sanctions are there for engineers who step out of their speciality into another person's specialty, which is what causes,
particularly some of your members who are working in development control offices. In development control, they are supposed to supervise this things and be sure it's not a matter of just going there to place an X in red ink. If a building collapses, where were the engineers in development control that probably looked the other way while the construction was going on?
Yes. So what are the sanctions, and is there any way that maybe license will be suspended or anything? How do you penalize them?
Engineer Gudule.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that question. I think recently there was actually a meeting in Lagos which I attended, and first and foremost, Nigeria need to be educated. They're engineers, they're technologists, they're technicians, and also they're craftsmen. Where I discussed at that meeting that first and foremost, there are people that call themselves engineers, and they are not having their name in current register. We have they give us the names, we check, some of them are not there. The clients and those people, the people that are developing, they need to check with current who is this person before you give your job to them. So when you, first of all, because current has a name, has also a number, registered number for each cadre of engineers. And when current checked, and current is able to identify that these people, they are authentic engineers, and they are registered with current, that time you'll be able to say, okay, I want to penalize. But when you have the cadres, we checked all the 7-story building that happened in Lagos recently. We couldn't even find more than maybe one of them. But of course, current as an establishment, we have disciplinary action that we take. We need to investigate to ensure, first and foremost, the guy is registered, and then we need to actually check what he has done. And then, if actually is found wanting, obviously it will be disciplined. License will be suspended, and that discipline action has to be meted on that particular individual.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We have to round up. Time is not on our side. Thank you so much for your input into the conversation. Let me begin. Engineer Olaolu Ogunduyele is the president of Current and chairman, vice president and chairman organizing committee of the 31st Current Engineering Assembly. Thank you so much for coming. Professor Ajisa Ademola Bello, registrar of Current. Appreciate your input. Professor Sadiq Zubair Abubakar, president of Current. Thank you so much for coming. We wish you all the best at the conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thanks so much for watching. I am Jummai Yusuf.
Join us again tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.